IIT Bombay welcomes you to one of the trademark events in the ENP Club. There are the new division this year, jobs and entrepreneurship versus higher education. I hand over the mic to Ms. Shweta.
Mr. Biswaroop Chakraborty is the Director at Deutsche Bank. He chose the career and the corporate role over higher education as well as over doing his own startup. Mr. Naveen Kabra, that is a PhD from Wisconsin, founder of Panelist, and also an IITB alum, so somebody you can connect with. Mr. Zishaan Hayath is the founder of Talker.com. He is also an angel investor in some startups like Ola Cab, Housing.com, Shop Sense, and also an IIT alum. And Professor Aliasgar Contractor on the higher education side is going to give us some background and perspective on why he chose that. And I think in his time it was very conventional to actually take the path that he did, but today more and more people are taking on that path. So I think his voice is something that you guys should definitely listen to and learn from. So before getting into any more detail, I'm going to let the panelists start with a little more detail on who they are, what exactly their role is, and also share the choice you made, why you made that choice, and what some of the dilemmas were while you were deciding.
Excellent. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for showing up. Beyond the fact that we're probably, Shweta and I probably are the two best dressed individuals in this room. Right? Points as Professor Contractor was saying that maybe we're not from IIT Bombay, right? Which clearly is the case. But I graduated way back, but a lot of the opportunities that you're seeing in the market right now in terms of higher studies, or whether I take a job, or whether I pick up an entrepreneurship play, is nothing new, right? Believe me, I graduated more than 10 years back, and it was the same thought process that everybody went through. But before winding on that, let me just give you a little brief intro about what I do. I did business school in the United States, and then how many of you have seen 3 Idiots? 3 Idiots in the movie. How many of you remember the thing that Ranjo says to, I think, Karina's fiance about how joker that guy is because of his background? How many of you remember that line? Yes, please, sir. Loudly. Anybody? What did he say? No, there was one thing before that. And then? That's precisely my background. You want to say that? Yes.
He said that he did engineering and then he did an MBA and now he's working as a bank employee. So he's a joker, he's doing different going from.
That exactly defines me.
You're also wearing a very expensive shoes.
Without digressing further, we'll continue here going forward, but you can imagine what my career path would have been anyway, right? my thought process around things are a little more contrarian than other people think, and we'll get there. But what I really did was at business school in the United States, post my engineering, I worked for a couple of years, came to the United States, and then did my MBA from there, and then from there I hit Wall Street. I was a trader on the street. I traded corporate bonds before I came back to Deutsche Bank in Mumbai in 2010. Currently, I work for a desk in New York, which pretty much does something called as arbitrage. That's not the point. We'll talk about it in our class of sometime. But beyond that, I also lead DB centers recruitment across IIT and IIM campuses across India. Anything else you want to say?
Why did you choose this other than the Joker analogy? But what were some of the alternatives as you were graduating, and why did you take DB over that?
Sure. Out of business school, there were a lot of alternatives as you guys faced, right? But there's only one stream that I had in my head in terms of figuring out what the right outcome for me is, and this is very esoteric to my DNA, right? And that thing is, whatever I do needs to be very dynamic. I'm impatient times. I get bored with doing the same thing over and over and over again. And let me do it for 5 years. I'm not that kind of a person. Hence, working in markets or business school was a natural choice because you make a decision, you do a decision, it's dynamic, and the output is then and there in terms of whether you made money or you lost money. Period. If that is what, so in other words, what I'm saying is, it makes sense for you to understand your own DNA and understand what you get comfort in. Obviously, I did a master's, so obviously I did my higher education at a certain point in time in life. The entrepreneurship option with $150,000 of loan behind you was a decent perk at that point in time. But there was decent options about whether I should continue my PhD or whether at that point I decided against it. So in terms of the job, I really wanted something which was vigorously dynamic, and a trading option on the Wall Street gave me that. Thank you.
Hi guys. So I graduated from IIT Bombay in 2005, civil engineering dual degree program. So I had 3 options. GRE, स्टडीज से प्रिपेयर करना शुरू कर दो, और कैट 4th year में प्रिपेयर करना शुरू कर दो, या जॉब. So starting up was not an option in 2005. At least it was not as much of an option as today. So I had 3 options. But for me the choice was pretty much clear because I was a dual degree student. मैंने कहा और पढ़ाई तो नहीं होगी, MS तो करने जाएंगे नहीं, ठीक है? तो GRE वाला option 3rd year में ही क्लिक कर दिया. No GRE in 3rd year. Then it was between job and CAT, IIM जाएं या फिर job ढूंढे. By 4th year I was certain that I don't want to study 2 more years and stay in school for 2 more years. I said I want to work for a bit and then I'll figure out. I was pretty open at that time. So I said, let me postpone my MBA decision by a few years. I'll figure out what I want to do, I'll figure out what areas I want to work in, and then we'll think about MBA. So after that I was pretty focused on job. So my thought process was, eliminate GRE in 3rd year because I didn't want to pursue a master's degree, another master's degree actually. Didn't want to go to school immediately after school, so kept CAT out. And then I started focusing on job. So then I started to figure out क्या करना है. I was in civil engineering, so उतना कुछ civil में great options तो थे नहीं. So I said, चलो अब तो जनरल जाना पड़ेगा. Let's try and apply to all the companies that came. Luckily, I got my job offer on day 1. So the first 3 firms that came to campus were McKinsey, BCG. BCG came to campus for the first time in 2005, and IBC. So these were the first 3 firms that came to campus. I don't think the order is still the same because IT must be now like 20th firm that comes to campus. But anyways, back then I got recruited by ITC and I went to ITC and worked there for 1 year. And within 1 year IT was campus job, that's what you get, you take that and then you figure out what you want to do, right? Pretty much. So within 1 year, I said, IT nahi karna, consulting karna. So I went to a boutique consulting firm called Opera Solutions. It was a small 150, 200 people firm back then. In few offices, they were setting up an office in Delhi, so I moved to the Delhi office. And I went to New York, then came back and started my first startup in 2000. So that's what I did immediately after college.
So actually, I didn't really have too many dilemmas in my career. I just always did the same and normal thing that everybody is supposed to do in that position. I got a good JE rank, so I just took the top branch that everybody takes if they have that rank. So that's how I ended up here. Then after that I got a decent GPA, so you're of course supposed to go to the US and do a master's PhD. I went and did that. And then while I was working for my PhD, my PhD project got bought over by a company, so I ended up doing a job for that company. But I got frustrated and quit. And then I was wondering what to do when one of my profs said, "Oh, I'm starting a new company and can you join?" And then, I pretty much said yes, because come on, interview nahi dena padega. So, and that was a startup in the .com time frame. So I got .com experience. But around this time was the first actual decision that I took, which was that I want to move back to India. And this was in 97, 98, before it had been common to come back to India, right? So I moved back, and then in India, I just again did the most standard thing, which is, find a nice big software company and get a job there. The first product company that gave me a job, I joined, which happened to be Veritas Software, and which is now Semantic Software. Right? Around 2007-8 is when I got really frustrated of my big company job, and I just pretty much quit in frustration. And I said I'm going to just goof off. So I spent 3 years goofing off, just doing completely random things. And then what happened was that while I was doing random things, some of the random things involved getting involved in the startup community in Pune and meeting a whole bunch of founders. And then after 3-4 years of doing that, the startup bug bit me. And also what happened was that there was one problem that I noticed in the way companies were hiring and how stupid they were being. And I said, there has to be a better way of doing this. And that's how I ended up doing my startup. So that's pretty much the story. Not too many dilemmas there. But over time, also I think when the questions and the discussion comes, I think the fact that I have done so many different things helps me in being able to compare this versus this versus this.
So I was actually, your first question set me thinking, what exactly do you do professionally? So, I got my first degree, I remember in 1973. So that's, and so at that time, there was hardly any, campus placement. We used to have a training and placement office on the ground floor of the main building where the security offices are now. And hardly any, nobody used to get recruited or anything. And the most, favorite option was to go abroad. At that time, nobody even thought of entrepreneurship. In fact, I was looking at the history of entrepreneurship of IITs. Somebody has done a study, and then I found that a lot of the IITs who have become entrepreneurs post 1990. That's when liberalization happened. Till then, nobody really thought about entrepreneurship. So I come from a community which is known for its technology. And I certainly didn't want to do what my father wanted me to do. So I came here. So I had actually, I could have been an entrepreneur at that stage. But then, I came here and I sort of really the life on the campus overwhelmed me. And I spent a long time here. And then I thought, these profs also have a good time. I went abroad and after a few years came back as a faculty member here. But I always had this feeling, that whatever I'm doing in my lab should have some relevance. Those days, actually, it used to be, people used to say with great pride, that I'm doing pure research, it has no application. I didn't really seem to agree with it. So I was always looking for some way to, so as it happened, my research, led to research in sensors and development of sensors. And that was about the time when SIGN was, founded, at IITB. That is the Society for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And, there weren't too many people who were willing to join SIGN. So the first professor in charge of SIGN, Professor Narayan, he said, Ali, why don't you, you have great technology, so I was, of course I had been toying with that idea. I was hoping that somebody else will take it up and put their money and I did not have to sort of risk my money on it. But that was not happening. So, I started a company in SIGN. It was still, it was personally for me not a very difficult decision, but I think in the community it was, in the campus community it was, I remember Professor Arun Kumar, computer science, meeting me one day in the corridor and saying, Ali, you're my kya sun raha hu? You started a company, so it's such a fall from being an academic to being an entrepreneur. But let me tell you that a few months ago he was also asking me, कैसे का start करते virus is spreading, which is good. But in my time, and of course even in Zishaan's time, we really didn't get any mentorship. When I started a company, I really thought that I have figured out all the problems, and I just have to announce it to the world that I have this product, and people will just come and buy it. It doesn't happen like that. So there are many things which one needs to learn. I actually faced a variety of reactions. So when I was pursuing my PhD, my relatives were sort of saying that this fellow is crazy and what is he doing? Just continue studying and studying. And then when I went to US, I said, okay, I've used Coco Chakra gone to US. Then when I came back, they said again this fellow is he's crazy. And then when I announced that I started a company, then said yes. Now so I guess I have more or less done what I wanted to do, regardless of what people thought. Maybe sometimes I did things just because people wanted me to do something else. But that's not really a good path to follow. Basically, you should follow your passion, and so long as you enjoy what you're doing, I think that's what is important. So to tell you something about my company, the company has more or less folded up. It still exists on paper, but I have managed to convince another much younger alumnus to start a company and commercialize this product. I'm now close to retirement. I'm going to grad next year. And so I guess I'm also looking at this option of what should I do. So the traditional thing is, you continue as emeritus professor or, this kind of thing. So I'll probably, again start taking my entrepreneurship very seriously.
At least you and your girlfriend don't have to coordinate the office.
So before we get into more specific questions to the panelists, can we have a show of hands just to get a feel for this move on? Who's thinking of actually taking a job right after college? Just a quick show of hands. Okay. So very few. How many of you are looking at further studies as an option? Okay.
Can we split further studies by MBA and MS? How many for that?
How many for master? MS? And how many for MBA?
Okay. And how many of you are looking to either start your own company or join a startup, an early stage startup? Wow.
Wow.
I saw some people raise their hands for multiple options. How many of you are going to try doing both? Try starting something and taking on a job? Okay. Interesting. Very interesting.
I just, on the job front, I just figured out people who got the internship, they put their hands up to get into the
Okay, so I just wanted to ask generally, now that you've taken these choices, what have been some of the pros and the cons of your decision? So I think Naveen talked about not really liking the corporate world after a point, and you've chosen to stay at IITB. So what do you see as some of the pros, other than having the opportunity to buy really nice shoes, of being in and maybe also some of the cons, just like have a very open and honest discussion on what we feel we struggle with as either an entrepreneur or
I think one of the things I personally have seen over the last couple of years, and actually even more, if you look at, while I did some research on entrepreneurship before I came in here for this kind of panel discussion, if you define entrepreneurship as something that you want to own and do and gives you the flexibility of doing something that you personally want to do, if that is what you define as entrepreneurship, let's just make the definition a little more macro, right? If the definition was such that you have a proposition that you want to do, it may or may not be your own company, but you have the flexibility of innovation, bringing to market a proposition that is non-existent right now, how would that look like, right? And one of the things that I actually have decent luxury of doing that was at Deutsche Bank Group in Bombay, right? Because it is not an entrepreneurial venture in the strictest of terms that we would ring fence it to be, but it is decently innovative in terms of products that our group does for some of these investors in certain ways, which are very dynamic in nature. And one of the things that I like about the job that I do is specifically that it is not a 9-to-5 job that you need to do. It is something that you're passionate about. Hey, you don't own the company, you don't want to own Deutsche Bank, but hey, within your sphere of influence, you've got decent amount of leverage in terms of how you put the work across to specific clients. And I think that's a big deal for a lot of us in entrepreneurial setups like us in Deutsche Bank in Mumbai. 750 odd people, so it's a relatively very new organization. It's been only around 8 or 9 years. I guess the average age of people there is 24, 25 years, nothing more than that.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you think that's because you're more on the trading side, and if you were doing M&A and you were working in a team with a more hierarchical approach as opposed to having to manage your own P&L as a trader, you wouldn't have as much flexibility?
Possibly. I mean, that's exactly what I was starting to give up, right, when we started this discussion. It depends on what you want to do and what you see in somehow happiness in, or what kind of settles you up. And the way I started the discussion was that is something very inherent in my DNA, that I wanted something in life which is decently dynamic in nature. I don't think anybody wants to take that away. The job offers something like that, with a decent amount of flexibility around what you do. I think this is what people have nowadays termed as something called corporate entrepreneurship. Because there are all windows around it as entrepreneurship, right? Because you have decent amount of flexibility around your job profile in terms of innovation, dynamicity, control, and work that you want to seek to do in a corporate paradigm. So yes, to your point, different jobs might offer you different DNAs on the way. I'm just speaking for jobs that is offered at IIT Bombay or for other IITs or IIMs that for that matter in the markets paradigm, which offers you decent elements of those in a certain way.
Okay, what about some of the cons of actually having a corporate job as opposed to maybe some of the people in your peer group who've gone on to do that?
Well, one of the cons I can clearly see, I can't get dressed up like in blue jeans and a t-shirt in a formal event. Right? I have, so there's some protocol my client believes in, and I adhere to some of those protocols. Hey, one of the days you're not feeling well and you want to take a day off. I mean, in terms of your personal choices around some of these elements, I think an entrepreneurship kind of a situation might cover you well. Not to take anything out of entrepreneurship, I think it's a decent part that I'm sure that will hit me someday going forward in life. Not to say that we are averse to that, but I would say a decent 9 to 5 kind of a job, kind of a paradigm is almost gone, right? The amount of face time that people used to do before, those are not the face times that people do over India right now. Very limited, especially in some of the banks right now. So you've got a decent amount of flexibility around work and stuff like that. If I had to put up cons, I would say your personal choices sometimes, you got to work long hours sometimes, you got to do stuff, entrepreneur setup. I think you have to do even more, not less. So I don't think anybody with an entrepreneur setup is going to take, 60 days away on vacation or something like that. I mean, I'll tell you something, right? I've seen people out of Deutsche Bank group in the last 2 years, people from IIT Bombay starting up stuff out of Deutsche Bank. And between us, right? Those were the best guys at Deutsche Bank group. So don't think that you have to be almost very decent and almost at the point of getting perfect at the element of the work that you do. Be it on a corporate profile or at entrepreneurship kind of setups. Those are the best guys we have. That kind of took off something else. So I don't think there is any kind of negativity about somebody taking another option.
And there's no set path. So what I'm hearing is that you could take the option of doing a job for a few years, getting experience. So a lot of us at McKinsey did that. We worked for a few years, we got the consulting skill set. How do you do Excel, how do you do PowerPoint, how do you run a client meeting, all those, the checklist, right? And you're supposed to get consulting. And then many people went on to do their own thing. So I would say that at least 30% of my McKinsey New York analyst class is now doing something entrepreneurial. But most of them didn't do that right after college. So I think
That's a very fair point. If you look at this panel here of people who are entrepreneurs, all of it did some kind of work to kind of start where they get the grind going and then pick up a path which is more suitable, right? Because it makes sense for you to identify what you really want to do. Because if you're not passionate about the work that you're doing, the failures are going to come and bite you right in your face. Because that is the time you need to be so much passionate about some stuff. Be it entrepreneurship or be it in your work. Right? You've heard all the stories about 2008 and so on and so forth. So with entrepreneurship, even corporate, anybody doing a corporate job in any part of the world got shaken up by that battle. Right? And if you're not really passionate about what you do and you don't hang around, you're toast. Right? In certain ways.
thanks, Biswaroop. So Naveen, you mentioned you would be able to contrast the pros and cons of different aspects which you've also experienced.
Yes. So actually, what would say? I mean, what he's talking about is the finance job, right? Where you have to wear this tie and a suit and you have to work long hours and so on. A job in a software product company is not like that. You go in jeans and t-shirt and you do your work and you take vacations. So in that sense, software or basically a technology job is much easier than most of the other options on this list. By contrast, entrepreneurship is actually quite tough. I mean, you are your own boss, except for the fact that all your customers are your boss. So, I mean, an entrepreneur never takes a vacation, right? I was in Uttarakhand, on top of Dodital mountain, and I got a call from a customer, and I took it, right? So that's what entrepreneurship is like. Now, what are the advantages of a job? The thing is, how many of you like technology? Yes, a lot of you. If you are an entrepreneur, you cannot spend more than 15-20% of your time worrying about the technology. There is so many other things to worry about. There is sales, there is marketing, there is hiring people, there is all kinds of stuff. And there is, the fact that electricity goes and then your computers, the battery goes after 2 hours and now you can't do any work, and what do you do about UPS and all sorts of things you have to worry about, right? So suddenly technology becomes a very small part. So if you want to work on technology and that's the only thing that matters to you, get a job in a good technology company, right? Because that's what the company does. It hires other people to take care of all these things so you can focus on being good at the technology. But what Biswaroop said is right, which is that you are not your own boss there, and what that means is that somebody else is making the rules, and the bigger the company, the farther away that person is who makes the rules as to how you will do things. And the big problem with that is you don't understand why that person made the rules. And because of that you get very frustrated. You don't understand why you have to do things a certain way, but you have to do things that way because that's the rule. And you have to spend a lot of time in coordination, because you just can't yell across the room to the person because he might be sitting in the US. So you have to have meetings and you have to have document everything and you have to write emails. And how many of you write programs code? A lot of you. How many of you write comments in your code? Yeah, right. So the point is that you have to spend a lot of time doing all this extra documentation, this thing and that thing in a company, and that gets frustrating, right? Whereas, and you are very far removed from the customer. Whereas if you are in a startup, you feel the impact of the customers on a daily basis. Whatever you are doing affects the customer right away. So in that sense, if you are a person who wants to see something come out of what you did, if you want people to cry when you make a mistake and people to be very happy when you do something good, then you should be in a startup.
Okay. Yeah, and not only your customers, but even your clients and your managers become, especially if you choose a consulting job, become your boss. So sometimes your manager might tell you that you need to work on something for a client, and you may disagree. You may feel that that's not a priority right now for the client. Whereas, as a junior, you're going to enter at the bottom of the pile, right? So as the junior most person in that organization, you really have no say on what to work on. So not just control on writing comments, but pretty much on everything you do is going to be dictated by someone else. And you really have to love it to be happy, or you just have to put your head down and say that I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do this for a few years, I'm going to do a good job, and then I'm going to do something else. So I think that is definitely, I mean, having been in a pretty rigid, so flexible environment, you don't have a lot of choice. Anybody wants to add anything, or should we move on to the next? Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of the choice.
No, I think I'll pick up on this boss thing. If you think you're going to be an entrepreneur because you don't want a boss, you just have to come home in the evening and be a boss. Maybe, doing things because you want to avoid the boss, but learn how to deal with the boss. But I will say something for my profession in a sense, because all faculty members, especially in institutes like ours, where there is a lot of freedom to do many things, are in a sense entrepreneurs. Our research is funded totally by the money that we get. So I have to go, to various funding agencies and make a pitch that, this is what I want to do, and this is, what I develop, and it will change the world and things like that. Of course, they also know it is not going to change the world. So, yeah. So in that sense, in institutes like ours, there is a lot of freedom, and so those of you who are academically inclined, you can still be an entrepreneur and an academic. Okay? You can have as large a research group as you can manage, as large funding as you can manage. So I think that's also an option you should keep in mind. I would be failing in my duty if I was a professor and come here and tell you that that's not a nice thing to do. So basically, I think you should follow your passion, and people work hard because they like to work hard. And if you are doing something which you really don't care for, then you feel the pain. Otherwise, I think very often, I have had people telling me that you guys are professors, you have no stress. But if you look at the statistics, the number of professors who are dying of cardiac arrest, some of it might be because of you, but so I think you need to find what you enjoy, and I think the environment right now, compared to my time, when the only option was take a job and you'll sort of be able to meet your need. But now I think there are so many things you can do and still maintain a decent lifestyle.
Any other cons of academia other than the risk of heart attack?
And you have great assignments, extensions and midterms. So students think that that's the enjoyable part, that's the not really enjoyable. But if you enjoy what you're doing, I think the best thing about academics is, every year you see a fresh set of students. And, even at age 65, I still feel enthusiastic when I come to office every day. Because there are new young people coming, and that sort of freshness rubs off on you. So I think that's something which only academics can do.
So my feedback is for those who want to start up immediately after college. Okay. So I started my first company 3 years out of college, and we sold it within 3 years of starting out. And now I'm working in my second startup. And I have invested in 8 startups so far. So I can talk about 10 startups that I've been closely associated with. Starting up immediately after college is not as glamorous as it seems when you are in college. Okay, because starting up is not about working on an idea. Starting up is about building a company. And like you said, working on the idea is only 10-15% of the part. Remaining 75-80% is running a company. So that includes, opening the shutter, and I also do some cleaning in the office. Jab bhool hoti hai, to my bike comes at 1 o'clock. So I come and clean my own table in the morning. Right? You don't have to do that and it's a lot of pain also. So when things work, it is very beautiful. But in general, startups are a lot of pain. Pain as in like genuine severe pain. So quick pluses I would imagine would be the optimism of creating wealth. Well, bane ya na bane wo alag baat hai, but you will always have an option of creating, you will always think badi ho jayegi, so you always live in a hope. So that's a great plus point. The other thing is you are working on you're pursuing your passion, so that's another plus point. But the negatives are you have to endure a lot of pain, that's the biggest negative, and the other negative is you can go completely broke. 5 साल लगाओगे and you will still be like where you started in terms of finances, and your mom will call and say बेटा 28 का हो गया है, शादी कब करेगा? तो तेरे को तो salary भी नहीं आती है, all that. You can be completely broke even at 28, 29. So it's something to think about. My usual recommendation to people starting up is to work for a few years before you get there, because at least you know the nuts and bolts of a company. Company में HR क्या है, finance क्या है, core क्या है, non-core क्या है, location, hiring. What is it to work for a boss? What is it to work with a colleague? What is it to recruit? What is it to work with a junior? What is it to mentor? All these things are the 80% part. Idea and technology and changing the world is only 20% of the part. So it's good to get grounded at somebody else's expense in the first 2-3 years, and then go chase whatever you want to build. Also, one more very tactical thing is when you start up from campus, you tend to choose people who are your friends as co-founders. तो दोस्त होते हैं, चल तुम्हें co-founders. Whereas when you start up 3 years later, you will discover who you are. So you will say, I'm a product manager. So now I need an engineer as a co-founder. So you will go find for the best engineer as a co-founder. जो दोस्त है तुम है दोस्त और तुम है co-founder because he's the best engineer and I'm the best product manager. And we are 2 of us but working 2 of us. So that's how you build teams. In campus, that that discipline is not present. So that will बाद में पता चलेगा, but that's an opportunity lost, right? 2-3 साल waste हो जाते हैं.
I think that's very profound actually. I just want to say that there's a course at HBS called Authentic Leadership Development, and it actually says exactly that. If you haven't figured out who you are, if you don't know your authentic true self, you can never really figure out your life path, and you can never really figure out what you want to do. And ultimately, your startup has to be about what you want. It can't be about the biggest trends in the media today. So, to his point, understanding your strengths, understanding your relevant areas, and understanding who you would work well with, who will complement you, is critical before you go on to this entrepreneurship.
Okay, one quick question. How many of you write code? How many of you want to write code? Like really want to write code? तुम लोग का सबसे ज़्यादा chance है starting में. Serious.
So, actually we're just talking so much about startup, and most of you are not going to do a startup, okay? So let's focus on the things that you are going to do, and plus I would like to sort of defend the one option that nobody has talked about, which is higher studies. Especially if you like technology, please go to an MS in the US, okay? There are a lot of reasons why that is a good thing for you to do. One is that you will get exposed to a better education system. I mean, IIT was great and IIT played a large part in what I am today, but the fact is that this is not one of the best education systems in some sense, right? You need to be exposed to how it is done better. That is one. Second is you will get exposed to a different culture, a different way of thinking, a different way of working out there, which is important for you to know. Third is just generally the how they approach work is very different from how we approach work, especially IITians. Most IITians that I know do things at the 11th hour, do the minimum necessary to do the assignment and get a good grade, right? Whereas the most common way things are done in the US is that they start the assignment on the day it is given, and they work regularly a little bit every day on it and get it done in time.
Good education is as much about students as about teachers.
Oh, absolutely. One thing I did say earlier in disadvantages of being a prof, I mean, you are too nice to say it, but I have friends who are profs in IIT and in other places, and their number one complaint is that the students are just not interested in what I'm teaching them, and that is very, very frustrating for me. Okay? So that is all your fault.
So,
one quick addition, if I were to do it all over again, right, starting 2005, graduating from IIT Bombay, I would optimize for travel. I would not optimize for compensation, I would not optimize for which company I go to, I would not optimize for when do I get to an MBA or when do I get to starting up. I would just optimize for how much can I travel in the next 4 years. How many cities can I live in, how many countries can I see, how much food can I eat, how much different work cultures can I see. I would just optimize for travel. I think discovery is very important. And once you discover, you will automatically figure out that I'm going India wala product manager or I'm Silicon Valley wala product manager or I'm a Wall Street wala banker. I think that discovery will happen. But I would not slot myself into entrepreneurship, startup, MBA or MS. I would rather optimize for, just seeing more.
No, so I would still back for MS. I would say go do an MS or even a PhD. You can still do the optimize for travel part after your MS, right? I learned sailing, and I learned windsurfing, and I learned ballroom dancing. And for all this while, somebody else was paying me for all of this. So, and all that while I was also learning the other things I mentioned. I was getting exposed to different cultures, I was getting exposed to people from all over the world. And later on, that changes your whole outlook towards life. It puts you in a different orbit as far as your career choices and your job and how you do your job is concerned. So for that, I would say that if you financially, if it makes sense, if it is possible for you, you should definitely do an MS if you are interested in technology. If you are not interested in technology, you are the kind who's sort of more, going to get out of technology and want to become a manager or something, then yes, go for a job.
Okay, so let's open it up now and we keep interspersing it with questions to the panel. But let's open it up and hear from the audience. Can someone help by passing around the mic? If you can address the question to a specific person on the panel.
Hello. This question is for Biswaroop. So basically, from my perspective, all I know about your field as an investment banker or taking up a job in finance is through like movies and soaps and all. So is it as glamorous as they make it to be? I mean, everybody has seen Wolf of Wall Street, we have seen Suits. So I was inclined towards investment banking was because it's investment banking, like a glamour factor. So is it really as glamorous?
So, it is, sometimes in life, what we do is credibility through association. Right? Here's one professor, he's credible, he's credible fundamentally, also credible because he's a professor at IIT Bombay. Some people are here who startups, credibility through startups and, possibly making a lot of money. Credibility that we will table is something that, is something which you have heard through soaps, but it's incredibly tough life that you typically need as a banker, right? And some of those stories are probably hidden for you for best known, but it is the probability, first of all, the probability of you landing up a job in Wall Street or any of these things in terms of a probability basis is probably de minimis. Right? Not because I made that, I was extremely lucky to make it. But I'm saying everybody in the world has their eyes, and maybe Shweta can say this, on a tiny island in Manhattan to get yourself a job if you want to land up a job in finance. Right? So naturally you just compete with the, not only the Dela cream out of your campus, the Dela cream out of the world. And there are, some people will know that you're from IIT, some people will not know you from IIT. Now, from a business school or an IIT, you'll get a foot in the door. The then you have just equal parity with anybody sitting around. And that's what is, you got to do the ground work, you got to do everything, and that's what I think my question was. Like, depending on the job that you do, there's a lot of hard work that people do before they get up. In fact, one of the, people who went into the consults from my batch, and it was running, commentary around in New York, that, if you're in a consult like a McKinsey or some of these consults, right? If you make it for the first 3 years, you're probably going to make it for a longer period of time. Because the first 3 years is so much of hard work across any of the banking consults, because you're just picking up and at the same time competing with people around who are probably a delta better than you. And most interesting thing about this banking situation that you might know here is, on my right is my managing director, who's liberal arts from Harvard, English literature. On my left is the strongest analyst on the street, is a biology major from Princeton. And we three are competing on the same trade. I'm not from IT, neither is any of the other people from IT. Once you got a foot in the door, it's pure horsepower, brain power you do on.
So is it glamorous?
Well, I get to wear some fancy suits, some ties, some shirts, but I do have my black wrinkles under my eyes that I have to sometimes forge. But yeah, it is glamorous, but it's a lot of hard work. Well, one of the things that actually I've told a lot of people, but what my boss had said, and you could argue one way or the other, right? If you're looking for a job, and obviously I can only speak for the work that I do, I can't comment on other jobs, that he mentioned this, right? If you want a job out of a business school or any other undergrad, out on the street, right? The maximum amount of gray matter that you use, or in other words, horsepower that you use for unit time that you actually use, will be something very related to trading. And the reason is because of the amount of pressure or asymmetric information that we deal with. So it's glamorous for you on the face of it. You should look at all the traders in 2008. All we did was show up at 6 o'clock in the morning, stay till 6 o'clock in the evening, not press a key, lose $200,000, go back home, and perspiring the whole day. Not make a single trade. The market just went against you. It's going against every day. You didn't make a single trade. You just stood on the trading floor, perspiring, right? And getting all kinds of nice words from your bosses around. Right? You're just standing there doing not a single trade, perspiring, go back. So you might, there's obviously two sides of the coin all the time. You get, some of the fancy movies and stuff like that will give you only one side of the story. The other side is starkly different from what you guys think it is. Right? There's huge barriers to entry in some of these kind of jobs. And IIT Bombay, being one of the premier institutions in the country, we got the luxury of choosing some of these options out of engineering school. Now, a lot of your compatriots outside don't have that luxury.
Thank you. Other questions?
So my question is that should we consider higher education just after graduating from the college, or should we first do a job for a couple of years and then?
So if it's technical higher education, if you're thinking of a master's, then you should do it immediately after college. If you're thinking of an MBA, then first do a job for 2-3 years and then do an MBA. Don't do an MBA immediately after college. But MSc should do it immediately.
So, what if you are thinking of starting up?
If you are starting up, I think what he said makes a lot of sense. Work for a few years, get.
What about an MBA?
Sorry?
What about joining?
Not worth it. The only way you learn about doing a startup is by doing a startup, and the second best way is by working in a startup, joining at a very early stage. Everything else is just,
So an MBA won't help. when you are starting?
I don't think MBAs have startups. My wife is an MBA.
So the question was whether MBA should I do an MBA if I want to ultimately do a startup? And I don't think it is.
I would like to disagree. Being a MBA you guys can come probably afterwards if you want to go to Harvard to do your MBA, and I can tell you why it's probably the 2 best years of my life. I think it did help me with starting up alumni, but that's also because the social enterprise initiative of HBS supported my startup. So I had a professor working closely with me on my business plan. If I didn't have that, I agree with him. I think, staying on, and I also did join an early stage startup, Teach for India, before going to HBS. So being on both sides, right now at Alumni, I have a lot more backing because of the Harvard name and also the professors at HBS than I did at Teach for India.
I think I would agree with her. Out of business school, listen, when you go to an MBA program, there are 2 things that you do. The first thing, your motto is network, network, and network. Right? Nobody really goes to business school to study. Or they do, but that's your primary, is create your network of people. And with that network of people, so if you look at MBA, so for example, I think I disagree a little bit on the MBA comment that he made. If you do an MBA in business school in the United States of London, I would agree that you need a decent amount of work days. Average work days in the United States before you start an MBA is 4.8 years. Okay? In India, if you look at A, B, and C, 3 premier schools, which we regularly hire from, I would say 3/4 of them are 0 experience. Or I would say less than 1 year. Predominantly. I think other than ISB, which is predominantly, very skewed to the right-hand side of the equation, India is still not geared up for IIM schools, which has significant amount of work experience. When I say significant amount, more than moderately 2 years going into IIMs. Not a whole lot. So if you still want to do an MBA, in an Indian context, I would take the decision very quick out of school. Number 1. Number 2, the MS situation that he said. If you look at the 90s and now in the late 80s, people did MS for 2 reasons. A, study. Second, foot in the door in the United States or London. Right? I want to get into the country. That's an easier way to get in the country because nobody's going to offer me a job. Things have changed. There are a lot of people who do not take up MS option not because they don't want to study, but the foot in the door option is kind of relatively lesser because you've got a lot of companies here. You work hard, they'll send you to the United States, London, Japan, Korea. For example, I was talking to this guy, Klash. He's got an internship in Samsung, Korea. Never existed in 95. Did it? I probably didn't. Is what I'm thinking. McKinsey hires from where? When did McKinsey start hiring here? Let's say, what? Early 2000s? Maybe? Well, probably McKinsey gives you an option after 3 years to rotate around an international stint. With Deutsche Bank Group here, there are at least 8, we rotated around 15 odd people last year to go final placements across the country. Those kind of opportunities in the 90s never existed. Right? So if it is MS for MS and only academic MS that I want to pursue that stuff and not for a foot on the door, will I only consider MS personally?
Thanks, Biswaroop. I think there are a lot of questions, so in the interest of time, let's move on to the next, and let's keep the questions short and let's keep the answers shorter.
Hello, Zishaan, what do you look for in startup?
Early stage startups, I look for 3 things. Market, that's the biggest thing. So how big is the market? Second, team, who is solving for that market? And third, product. What is your solution for that problem within the market? So early stage, market, team, product. Slightly later stage, it flips to market, product, team. Even later stages, it changes, but that's the order.
you asked who code and who want to code. You said that those who want to code have a better chance of starting. So can you elaborate on that?
So yeah, so our ideas about working when we are in campus are MNC based job है, BCC based job है, finance करना है, etc. And writing code is very very unsexy, right? Not नहीं करना. But मेरे हिसाब से so our biggest assets in our firm, in our company, are engineers. Half the company is owned by, more than half the company is owned by engineers in terms of equity also, right? The guy who wrote code is owning half the company. So मेरे ख्याल से वो बहुत unsexy है, whereas reality में वैसा नहीं है. They are the best people to build. They are most capable of building. Business development people are not capable of like building disproportionate value. They are able to create incremental value, 10% to 10% to 10%. People who can write code are able to build disproportionate value, 2x, 4x, 8x. So I would say if you really want to start up, I think what all of us should do is start to program. The other two options, I'm talking about consumer internet startups, but it's like disclaimer. Consumer internet startups, the three key people are engineer, product manager, designer. I think all of us should try to fit into those three slots if you want to do a consumer internet startup.
This question is to Naveen. Can you elaborate more on the point that we should do MS immediately after passing out? And wouldn't it be better if I take if I take a job, taking a job maybe in class?
Well, yeah, the problem with taking a job and then doing an MS later is that it really doesn't add a whole lot of value to the MS. Because anyway, you could do it later, but what I found mostly is that as you get sucked into the job, you have less and less time to do the application process and other things needed for being able to go successfully for an MBA. So, sorry, for an MS. So it's easier to do it immediately. There is nothing wrong with doing it later, but it doesn't. Doing it later doesn't add a whole lot of value. Whereas in an MBA, although a lot of students are joining an MBA right away, but my point is that if you work for a few years, you will get much more out of the MBA. The other thing about doing an MS right away is that you are going there not just for foot in the door, you are going there not just for getting education, you are going there to get exposed to that culture, to make understand things there, and that you can only experience as a young student. Going to the US on a job is very different from going to the student and going as a student and staying in the dorm and staying with a whole bunch of other students.
Thank you.
Same question actually. I am pursuing my MTech currently. So,
if you are doing an MTech, you should still go and do an MS in the US.
my question is actually, why not go for a PhD? Why go for a master's?
Yeah. I have close to this point. That's not true. You spend time in the US as a student and learn something. That's what I'm saying.
So, we're talking about vertex helping in MBA. People usually have vertex in MBAs, even they are in US or Canada. So, what kind of vertex do they expect? Whether vertex in a technology firm help in an MBA or?
So, I don't think firms typically make a distinction in a work-ex kind of situation. If you look, especially at the United States, they say 75% people, or 3 in 4 people that go into MBA are actually career changers in the United States, right? In other words, they want to change what they were doing pre-MBA to what they want to do or perceive to do post-MBA. So I don't think any school specifically targets that you wouldn't be able to move from software to, let's say, marketing or something like that. It's great about application skills as long as you can apply, everything is good.
You need to have a story. You need to know what you want to do with your life. And and why you want to do it. And as long as you can, sell that story to the admissions team, you get it. It's as simple as that. Next question.
So my question is, I want your comments on two particular points. Firstly, you said that if the first 3 years in an investment bank, typically that gets you in later on for your further.
Can you speak up?
Are you able to hear me now? So you mentioned that the first 3 years in your typical investment bank career would help you to kind of have the long run. I want to know why is it that the fine print in every first 3 years is not explained to the recruits, because essentially if you move after your first 3 years, then you're kind of someone just said this to me, that you're kind of more trapped into the entire firm because your bonuses are paid into stocks which are kept into a lock-in period and things like that happen to you. So you're never making that well, but you're getting ahead in your career just for saying. And secondly, the second point I want to have your comment on is, what would be your opinion in making a career in finance by working for first 2 or 3 years in a typical investment bank, understanding the structure and the markets, and then moving to a smaller fund where you have more areas and to management?
Okay, so let me understand your first question. I did not understand it. So you're saying that how come nobody tells you out in your face the first 3 years you got to be water hard?
No.
Sorry, what was the question?
I wanted to know why is that.
What happens in
3
your
years? After 3 years of career investment in an IB, most of your profits are paid back in terms of stocks, which are in locked-in period. So this is something very
And
different.
who's giving you that information?
Someone of your. So why is it not that transparent? Why is that career?
Well, first of all, your assumption, to the best of my knowledge, doesn't hold any water. Okay? Generally, analysts or somebody who's very junior in the organization, if somebody has to pay stock options, you have to understand, paying a stock option to a person who's getting the highest pay in your group makes a little more sense. Because you want to retain that person on their compensation basis for a longer duration of time. Right? To the best of my knowledge, during my division in Wall Street, as an associate, you never got paid compensated on stock. Well, after 3 years it will be, as you grow, it's not 3 years, it will be 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, whatever it is. It is. So, listen, as I said to you, the thing is the first 3 years is decently grunt work because you're moving up from a campus kind of a system to a corporate kind of system, you're an analyst in the firm, you're trying to learn what you want to do. A lot of the stuff that senior people don't want to do is fast coming you for you, as she was mentioning, that you can't really say no to those kind of stuff. First 3 years, at any point of time, in any organization around the world, is decently stressful. I don't see no reason why any organization, even if it's the point of ITC, I don't know what his experience is, everywhere you've got to figure out what you're doing. And naturally, for you, out of IIT, you're doing it in a finance kind of work, which is essentially something which you've not done in 4 years. It's going to be even more stressful. Because you're going to just even finding out, things going forward. So it is. And as you go higher and higher up, the competition is such, it gets deferred day after day. But it's nothing really for an analyst to associate. The second question was, sorry?
The second was, how about a career for working the first 3 years in a bank, understanding the structure, and then moving to smaller funds?
A lot of people do that.
Is it a final way?
It is a lot of people. So a lot of people, as an analyst in a bank, after 3 years, go to a business group, come back and do a fund, hedge fund. It's an option that you want to explore. A lot of people work for 4 or 5 years, go to the buy side. Work for a hedge fund or a private equity fund, depending on what kind of option they have. That's an option career path that you can choose to explore.
Okay, we'll come back to you. If you have more questions, take it off then.
I'm a master's student here, and I have my own startup, and science is helping us to do it. So, from the discussion, I found out that it would not be advisable to do that.
Now that you already have it, you should continue doing that. You make it big or bad. Yeah.
We'll just take a couple more questions.
ultimately you want to do a startup and let the skills learned during PhD helps in terms of the technology and other skills learned.
Okay. Yeah, more broadly, but what kind of options would that PhD would have? How does that start?
So, answering your specific question, what a PhD helps you with, really, the technology part is not so important, okay? There are two things a PhD helps you with. One is that you really learn to communicate properly, right? You can't get papers published unless you can communicate your ideas well. You can simplify it to a point where other people understand how cool whatever you're doing is, right? So PhD is a lot of, in some sense, a technical sales job. So that communication is what you are learning, and that helps you with pretty much everything that you do afterwards. The second thing that a PhD helps you with is that, when you start a PhD, you're all excited and just like, oh, I'm doing a PhD and my advisor is so great. And 6 months later, you have an idea and you're working on it. By end of 2 years, you are depressed. You think, why am I wasting my time here? The only person who cares about this is me. Nobody else cares, and this is all stupid in any case, and this is pointless, right? You have to get past that low point, right? This is called the dip. You get the dip, and you have to somehow have the mental energy, the courage to get past that, so that after that again comes a stage where things start looking up and you start realizing that you are doing something worthwhile. The thing is, this is true of most long-term things that you do. If you do a startup, you have the same kind of a dip. So the mental preparation that you got to do during the PhD will help you in the startup, right? But not the technology itself. Most of my friends and myself who did the PhD, none of them is working in even the same field that they did the PhD in. So, as far as technology itself, it doesn't help. It's just other things that are helpful.
But Larry and Sergi PhD students?
Yes, they were PhD students. That's true. You can't really base yourself on Larry and Sergi and Steve Jobs, right? You're normal people. The thing is that to answer the broader question, what does a PhD help with? It's PhD pretty much, as long as you're willing to put your life on hold for 5 years, the PhD does help with everything. As far as you become a much better communicator, you become more resilient towards failure in your life. And most PhDs don't end up doing research jobs in any case. Industry loves PhDs, even in a startup. The fact that your PhD does help in getting the initial meetings. So this is helpful.
Okay, last question, or maybe one more. Can someone give us the mic?
So, if you don't want to educate yourself in some set environment of school, but you still want to go further into technology, is startup is the way out? Join some startup.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
If you do not want to educate yourself in some set environment of school, but you still want to go further deep down into technology, is startup the way out?
I mean, if you want to educate if I understand the question, you do want to learn and you want to go deep into technology, but you don't want to be in the school, you don't want to do classes, is startup the way out?
You want to join the startup, not startup per se?
No, startup wants
no,
you.
startup.
You may want it, but startups don't want you to come and learn at their expense, right? I'm already done.